Hey, welcome into another edition of the Chiefs Outsiders podcast. This is going to be a quick episode because we're just covering some breaking news today. You've probably already heard. We have a new wide receiver in Kansas City.
Yeah, the Chiefs made a trade today for last year's 20th overall selection, Kadarius Toney, out of Florida. Really explosive young player with a lot of untapped potential.
Yeah, and what happens with that untapped potential, how it develops from here, is the mystery. And if anyone knew, they'd know if we won the trade or not. But that's how those things go when you're taking a stab at finding talent without giving up a tremendous amount of resources. So both of us, our first reaction, well, I'll let you tell your first reaction when you saw it.
I didn't really understand the why of it. At first, I was my mind was made up that if they were making a move, it was going to be on the defensive side of the ball. So I wasn't a fan of it initially, but the more I thought about it, the more it makes sense.
So my first thing was, well, let's see what his stats have been, and it's not very good. I mean, so I'm going to give a caveat to his stats last year. He's playing on a dysfunctional team as a rookie receiver. He put up some pedestrian numbers, but you can completely give him a pass for it, really, not putting up big numbers with that team last year. And then this year, he's been on the injury report most of the time and hasn't had that opportunity. So, but then you say, why would a team get rid of a player that they have just invested a mid-round, first-round pick on, a middle of the first-round pick on, which is a very valuable resource? Why would you invest that and already give up on a player?
So it's a new regime, and part of what you were talking about last year with that dysfunction being Joe Judge, and I think we're giving a pass to everyone that was on the New York Giants last year because everything that's come out, all of the stories, all of the information we know about what that culture was like, it was just not good and not a lot of serious football going on.
And it's not a complete pass, so if you're dropping balls that hit your hands, like, it's still your job to catch the ball. But as far as just looking at overall production maybe not being what you wanted, it's not the same as if he had walked in to the Chiefs or the Bills or the Bengals last year as a rookie. It's a different expectation.
Yeah.
And what we did see was a couple of games where you said this is like an all-pro looking player. Mm-hmm. He had the game, 10 catches, 189 yards against the Cowboys. And you watched him, it wasn't like just a couple blown coverages where he snuck behind everyone and walked into the end zone for 80 yards. I mean, he was making guys miss. He was running a variety of routes and looked really good. But then you say, well, what happened to the rest of the year?
Yeah, and that is kind of the question. And it's, like we said, he's been dealing with some soft tissue, hamstring, and knee and all this little nagging injuries constantly. But I mean, the reason why the Chiefs realistically made this move ultimately, I mean, you have, some years of team control, but the way Kadarius Toney can move with the football, there's not 10 other guys in the league that can do what he can do in open space and making guys miss, stop ability. It's just, he's a phenomenal athlete.
And he's not Tyreek Hill in that category, but he's really good, and he's also a bigger guy.
Mm-hmm.
So
6 foot, 200 pounds.
Now,
that stop ability, I think that is, he may be as close as there is in the NFL to a Tyreek Hill.
So there's only one reason that I don't like that trade after I've had time to think about it. And that one reason is I think Daboll is a good coach. I think Kafka is a good offensive coach. And why are they doing this? Something didn't mesh there. They didn't like the way he practiced. He wasn't the right type of receiver for their offense, or it was a duplicate talents. Like something about made a good coaching staff decide they wanted to move on from this guy. And that's the only negative I've got. But if you can move past the fact that they moved on and say, new start, new opportunity, there's a lot to like about the potential. And usually when a team makes this deal, it's because that means Kansas City liked him and would have liked to have drafted him last year and didn't get the chance. And Veach has a history of bringing in washed up former number one picks at low cost.
Mm-hmm. And it's a little bit of all of those things, I think. First being that there is a little bit of a duplicate skill set there, and that the Giants just drafted Wan'Dale Robinson really high, who very similar skill set, and that was a pick made by Brian Daboll and Mike Kafka and that current coaching staff, whereas this one wasn't. And then there have been some concerns dating back to his college days, and then even in the NFL last year about his practice habits and his work ethic and how devoted he was to being an NFL receiver. But what that really boils down to is the Chiefs, who are one of the most well-ran organizations and a player-led locker room and environment, betting on their culture and their leadership at quarterback and head coach to be able to correct this guy's course and really get him in a positive situation.
And I do think they have the right culture to do that if that's what needs to happen. So now let's talk about so one thing that someone else pointed out, a couple things, and you piece them all together, and to me it really starts to make sense. First, the holdup probably for any Chiefs fan was hearing third round pick. You think, if we're trading a pick for an unproven guy, you'd like to see it be a lower pick. Well, it's not really a third-round pick because it's a compensatory pick, which they take the entire third round and then stack up a bunch of compensatory picks and then have the fourth round. It's like an early fourth-round pick, really. And this isn't our normal pick. This is a pick we got for our executive. The name is
Ryan Poles.
Ryan Poles went to Chicago, yeah. And we got 2 third-round comp picks, and we gave up one of those. So it's not as high a price as it originally sounds. And what I really liked about it was Mecole Hardman is going to get paid in the offseason. And the odds that he gets paid big by Kansas City are slim to none. Unless he wants to stay in Kansas City so bad that he's going to take a hometown discount, then he's gone. And I really don't think he is that guy because he's never been the tightest niched with the rest of the offense, it seems like. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think there's any way Mecole Hardman stays here after this year. So what you need is a replacement for Mecole Hardman who's cost effective, and they got it. Mm-hmm. Tony is going to replace him at a much lower cost for minimal compensation, and if Hardman leaves and gets paid well, Kansas City will probably get a third-round comp pick back for him. So we're going to get that pick back in a year is the possible outcome of it.
Right, and that's the only other holdup is that there is a good bit of overlap in what Kadarius Toney can do immediately. Like, if you needed him to play Sunday night against the Titans, what he can do with no prep time and what Mecole Hardman does in this offense are very similar. Being little jet sweeps and flat-out screens, quick to the flats. And
a question, something that just popped in my mind is just about how the team uses Mecole Hardman now. The team is dedicated to the fact they are going to run that route. They're going to run some misdirection by looping around the quarterback and watch what the defense does. They're going to run the jet sweep. They're going to run the fake jet sweep. They're going to do all of these plays that require a really fast receiver to be at the line of scrimmage. Sometimes I wonder if Mecole wasn't doing that, if they wouldn't like to have him taking more deep shots downfield, and he couldn't do both.
Yeah.
So
and I think that was the hope whenever you drafted McCole Hardman, but I don't know how well that's panned out successfully getting him on those routes.
This
But
show's about talking about Tony, but to me it feels like McCole just doesn't have that feel to be, and he's not in sync with how to finish routes the way Pat expects him to finish routes. Something I was thinking about today, when we're going to have a really deep receiver room, and I think we could potentially, there's reports out there still interested in Odell. When you've got a really deep, talented room, and everyone plays multiple positions or learns all the positions, and it lets you rotate your receivers out and keep them fresh, which teams already do. I was just thinking about the importance that if two different guys are running the same route, 4 plays separated, they have to run it the same way.
yeah,
And treat it the same way so Pat knows where to put the ball.
right. And there is a lot of value, I think, in that, and just how much of that Andy Reid is going to scheme up you can have those two guys on the field at the same time, and they're both a threat in that you can motion them across the formation on the same play type of thing. You can do all sorts of stuff to really put fear into defenses with those two kind of athletes. But I think the area where Kadarius Toney, it may take a while, where he helps this team the most, especially this season, is his ability to separate quickly against man coverage. The Chiefs, hopefully, that's what Sky Moore also can provide later in the season. But as it stands right now, the Chiefs do not have a guy who can do that. Juju Smith-Schuster is not the athlete, long speed, separating, running away from guys. Neither is Marquez. It's more of a build-up with him. And McCole is definitely not getting wide open on much man coverage. But Kadarius Toney, with that his first cut and that start-stop ability, he can create a lot of separation very quickly.
Yep. And I do like the move just from the fact I want my team to be aggressively seeking talent that can improve the roster. It's frustrating for a fan, even if it's the right thing for the organization. As a fan, it's frustrating when it feels like your team's just sitting there happy with status quo when you feel like a couple little changes could be the difference in a conference championship game or a Super Bowl. And so I like that they're pushing Justin Ross and Josh Gordon and Corey Coleman and guys who have displayed elite playmaking ability in their careers and for one reason or another are now available at low or no cost. And we're giving up a little more for Tony, but I like the idea of constantly probing. And those other guys, they didn't hurt the team by being given a chance and not working out. And Justin Ross still has an opportunity there, but I'm all for being aggressive as an organization.
And there's two things I want to add about that, is that it's a trope you hear often whenever we get these Brett Veach special type of moves of a first-round pick that hasn't necessarily panned out, is you are not getting a talent or an athlete like that. You're definitely not getting that in the third, fourth round, but you're also probably not getting that at pick 30, which is where the Chiefs usually are.
Yeah, and here's something else. So everyone talks about the Brett Veach special of trying to take these guys and give them a new life here. First-round picks, we've done it with defensive players and receivers and all over the roster, trying to find these salvage guys and let them rebuild here. But I was thinking, how would you get a talent like that if you don't pick high in the draft? One way, I mean, if we found Tyreek Hill, right? Well, there's two stories there. Number one is he had the athleticism, but he didn't have the size. So people weren't sure if he could really handle the physicality of the NFL. And then the second thing is he had major off-field concerns that is the only reason they got Tyreek Hill, who we wouldn't have won a Super Bowl without Tyreek Hill. And the only reason we got him is we were willing to take a risk on a guy that everyone else was going to bypass all those times through all the rounds. And we took a risk on a character and a size issue because we said there is an unmistakable talent here. And we didn't take him in the first round. We waited too. But sometimes you have to look at the pros and cons of taking a risk on a playmaker.
Yeah. And then that other thing I was going to add there, I saw it just a few hours ago. It was really pretty crazy to me is that since Andy Reid has been in Kansas City, the Chiefs have brought in, not by their own draft picks, they have brought in 17 first-round picks. The first of those being Alex Smith, and then later in that 2013 year, they did a one-for-one swap of A.J. Jenkins and Jonathan Baldwin. And then there were some other guys like Ben Grubbs in 2015. But the thing about that was crazy is that 13 of those 17 have been since Brett Veach took over in 2017. So, the DeAndre Bakers and there's so many others that, like 12 others that I'm forgetting off the top of my head, but so many in this 5-year run have been Brett Veach.
There's a lot to be said about player development, but there are certain things you can't develop, which is size, speed, and just freakish athleticism. You can't develop that. You either have it or you don't. And getting guys on your roster who have it at a lower cost and then seeing if you can bring out the production. So that's what we're all hoping for, and I'm optimistic. I also like that if I had to place a large wager on it, I might wager that that's the only move they make, but there's no reason to think they can't still go after that defensive target. Mm-hmm. It's not, I don't have that crushing feeling of this is all we get out of the Kelsey restructure and the trade deadline, and trying to make sure that we're not 1B to Buffalo's 1A, because that's where a lot of people are like, that we're just that step behind, and I'm not buying that to begin with, but you want to make sure that we're bridging that gap, because you only get so many years. Heaven forbid, Mahomes could get hurt, Andy could retire. The type of team that's assembled right now, as a sports fan, your team will only be this good on rare occasions.
You got to try to maximize your window.
Yeah, they've got to maximize the window, and this is in the window, and they've set the bigger window up for next year. Mm-hmm. That's when the salary cap is. That's when they have more draft picks. The last two drafts, which have been phenomenal on paper and on the field so far, mm-hmm. will be coming into their primes, and they've set themselves up more for next year, which is the first year the Bills have to pay Josh Allen. So the Bills have to start the process of making tough choices on their roster next year. But overall, though, I'm glad they made the move, and it factors in that only 2 Chiefs receivers are under contract next year as it is.
3 now, yeah. They and if you count Justin Ross, there are 4 guys who you can guarantee at this moment will be in training camp next year for the Chiefs.
So if you've watched this, one more thing to leave us a comment, okay? Do you like the move? And do you agree with me on side note here? And actually, he said it first. Right now is the time to re-sign Juju.
Yeah.
He's 25. Definitely. He's going to be 26 soon. But that's a young receiver that has put up all-pro numbers. He's on pace for 1,200 yards this year. I say pay that guy. Make him your 1 or 2 option for the next 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
While you develop some young guys to step up and get Sky Moore to that level.
I'd be all for it.
All right. Hey, well, we appreciate you watching, and we'll see you on the next one.